afternoon. I want to thank everybody for coming. I couldn't have asked for a better day. I mean, this was a beautiful day, and I'd like to thank everybody for taking their time out on an absolutely gorgeous summer day to come out and join us to have our voice heard about a rather important issue that's facing all of us over the course of the next year, 2 years. And the implementation of Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, will impact the lives of everybody. And so, first and foremost, I want to say thank you as we adjust the volume to get that right. And I know I've spoken to people from all across the state who've come here, so I really want to just say thank you for taking the time. Now, as you know, during the passage of Obamacare, then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, "We need to pass a law to find out what's in it." Well, we passed the law, and now we're finding out what's in the Obamacare law and its impact it's having on people. And I think that we all understand that prior to passage of Obamacare, healthcare and the healthcare financing system in New Hampshire and across the country wasn't perfect. It was not perfect, and we as a group, Americans for Prosperity, we're leading advocates for making change to the healthcare system then. But the system that we've gotten and the system that we're going to get over the course of the next few months is something that's going to have a serious impact on the consequences of our life. And the biggest problem with Obamacare is the broken promises. The broken promises that we were all made. See what happens when you say that? Careful. No, but we were all promised that there'd be no tax increase.
That's right. That's what I say. It's got to come back.
Okay. We were promised that there was going to be no middle-class tax increases. Well, obviously, we now know that if you don't have health insurance, everyone who doesn't have it is subject to a $95 or greater tax just for not having health insurance. So we know that's not true. We were told that we would have lower costs. And we know that's not true. In fact, if you look at what's going on nationally, the state of Ohio, their insurance department came out and said that they're going to see 88% increases in their premiums. The state of Indiana said 72%, and the state of Maryland just came out and said 25%. Here in New Hampshire, the insurance department said that they're not exactly sure what the increases will be. But this is the same Department of Insurance that's just said that if more insurers join the marketplace here in New Hampshire, prices will go up. So maybe we ought to send them to a little bit of an economics class to understand how competition works. So we know that prices are going up. We know that the prices have already gone up. I spoke to a small business owner in the hospitality industry who said his health insurance premiums are going up 53%. 53%. I know a woman who owns a small consultancy, and it's just a handful of people. She said her health premiums are going up 65%. And I spoke to someone just yesterday at our Freedman Legacy breakfast, who said to us that she was lucky. Her health premiums are only going up 40% next year. So we know that those, particularly in the small group and the individual healthcare markets, are seeing huge increases in their premiums. So that's a huge issue that's going to impact mostly small businesses. But those of us who live in New Hampshire know that the vast majority of us work for small businesses. We're not a state that has major defense contractors. Although we do have BAE, we're basically driven. Our economy is driven by small business. We're also told that we'll be able to keep our health care. I was speaking to someone today who told me that Obamacare cost him his health care plan. Just cost him. Now he no longer has his health insurance. There's two people who have lost their health insurance thanks to Obamacare. We were told that you'd be able to keep your doctor. We found out now that that's not true either. So nothing but a series of broken promises. And it's not just the promises that are broken. I mean, it's the impact it's going to have on our economy otherwise. Many people have heard about the medical device tax. There are companies out there like Salient Surgical in Portsmouth or Next Step Orthotics in Manchester who are subject to this new medical device tax, and they're being hit by a new tax to make, for example, Next Step Orthotics makes prosthetics a lot of time for returning soldiers who are coming back from Afghan and Iraq. And now they're being taxed on those same prosthetics that they're making. Now, the president campaigned on better coverage and lower costs, but the truth is that the president's law is unaffordable, doesn't do enough to address the rising health care costs for Americans, and gives too much control to Washington. And I think we all know that with all the problems we've seen lately with the IRS, ask yourself this: with this new data hub from Obamacare, how many people here think it's a good idea to give access to our private health information to folks in Washington? No. Exactly. And it also puts more pressure on programs that people truly need, like Medicare and Medicaid. And that's the first thing you should do is the old adage, ironically for doctors, is first do no harm. And when you do health care reform, the first step should be do no harm. And so we've seen a number of parts that haven't worked, and the president has actually admitted they haven't worked. For example, the Class Act, long-term care insurance, never made it out of the gate. Didn't even get to the point of failure. The co-ops, the co-ops that were designed to provide health insurance, nope. Long-term care pool already ran out of money, has been shut down, and now we're seeing competition in the exchanges. Sorry, maybe not. Maybe in 2015 at the soonest. And the last, of course, was the employer mandate that was just announced this last month. I guess we're in August now. Is going to be pushed back for at least a year. At least a year. And I think we all know that it's a good thing that if the president recognizes that if a part of the law isn't working, that they should say we should stop it. But he needs to understand that there are parts of law, there are parts of the law that are still in place that are still going to have other serious negative consequences. So, from our perspective, we think we need to slow down the implementation of this law and make sure we get it right. People's lives are at stake. Healthcare means too much to too many people. So, when you're talking about a time, plus we're talking about a time when we have a $16.7 trillion debt. And that's not counting the $759 billion deficit we're running just this year. And so why are we borrowing more money to pay for a health care program that's not working? Now, the promises that were made haven't come true. We've seen that, but a lot of the unintended consequences have, and these are a lot of consequences that a lot of people suggested would happen when the law was being discussed. And it's increasingly obvious that the Obama administration is nowhere near ready to deal with the countless negative consequences that this law creates. These delays amount to an admission that forcing small businesses, at least in terms of the employer mandate, to comply with more onerous regulations will cost us jobs and hurt our economy. I think we saw just this week one more example, which was former Vermont Governor Howard Dean in a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. He said that the IPAB, the Independent Physician Advisory Board, which is designed to come up with $714 billion in reductions to Medicare, he said it amounts to, in his words, healthcare rationing. This is exactly what was suggested during the discussion of the passage of this law, and now someone who's a former physician and a former governor and a former head of the Democratic National Committee has said is true. It is healthcare rationing. So what we think is, first and foremost, we need to stop the implementation of this law because it's doing more harm than good, and we need to focus on how do we reform the entire healthcare system to ensure it goes from a government-run takeover of our healthcare that interrupts the relationship between us and our healthcare providers, and instead is replaced by a patient-centered one that provides real healthcare solutions that will fix and improve the healthcare system without driving up massive costs. So I want to thank you all for coming. I have a few folks here who want to say a few words. Actually, our first speaker is a fellow who, frankly, I used to work for. He is the former Speaker of the House. He was a person who supported and sponsored a number of pieces of legislation to slow down the implementation of Obamacare here in New Hampshire. And his name is Bill O'Brien, and he's currently a state representative from New Boston and Mount Vernon. Bill?
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for all of you for coming. 150 years ago, a great president, Abraham Lincoln, cautioned us that politicians could fool all the people for some of the time. 3 years ago, a failed president, Barrack Obama, demonstrated that Lincoln was right. He and his allies fooled many of us, and fooled us long enough to pass a law that is clearly among the worst ever enacted by Congress. They passed Obamacare. And what is Obamacare? It is a law as destructive to personal and individual liberty as the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 that allowed slave owners to come to New Hampshire and seize African Americans and use the federal courts to take them back to slave states. It is a law as destructive of our federal system as the liberal progressives' own 17th Amendment, which allowed the federal government to bypass the states in choosing senators and thus grow federal spending from 7% of the economy to now where it's upwards to 40% of the economy once state controls were lost. Obamacare is as destructive of our personal freedom as the liberal progressives' income tax that was passed at the beginning of the last century. Obamacare's individual mandate tells us to turn over our health care to the federal government, just as the income tax tells us to turn over our financial lives to the federal government or go to jail. And how do they fool us? What were the stories of Barrack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid that are now repeated past any possible limits of credibility by Ann Custer and Carol Shea Porter and Jean Shaheen? They said that Obamacare would cut the cost of health care. Instead, premiums are going up. They're going up as much as 100%. They're going up an average of 32% caused by Obamacare alone. They said Obamacare would reduce the federal deficit. The Congressional Budget Office is now telling us it will increase the federal deficit by $6 trillion. They said it would increase jobs. Instead, millions will lose their jobs or be converted to part-time employment because of Obamacare. The 16,000 new IRS jobs that will be created to make sure that we comply with Obamacare don't make up for those millions of jobs. They said Obamacare would cover 44 million uninsured Americans. Instead, it will leave 30 million Americans uninsured. They said Obamacare will not add one dime to the cost of health care. Instead, it will add $1.3 trillion in health care costs and steals over $700 billion from Medicare for seniors in order to make it work. They said Obamacare would involve no new taxes. Instead, there are over 20 new taxes, including a $123 billion tax on investment income, an $86 billion tax on Medicare, a $65 billion individual employer mandate tax, and $205 billion in additional tax increases. They said Obamacare would let you keep your doctor and your health plan. Instead, when your employer lays you off or gets as a number of employees under 50, you will be forced into federal health care exchanges and might have to turn to the federal health care welfare program called Medicaid. Their tales ushered in what their own Finance Committee Chairman Max Baucus calls a train wreck, a legislative train wreck called Obamacare. The truth is that under Obamacare, young people in their 20s who on the average incur under $1,000 in health care costs a year will have to pay for policies that cost $9,000 a year. The truth is that they are robbing Medicare for seniors to pay for Obamacare. The truth is that they are forcing states to put their own taxpayers at risk by expanding Medicaid based upon empty federal promises to pay. We should have been told these truths, and we should have been told that they plan to borrow hundreds of millions, billions of dollars from the Chinese and made up Federal Reserve money to pay for Obamacare. They should stop the stories, and they should tell us straight up how, when we can't afford today's healthcare system, we're going to afford tomorrow's healthcare system, plus a huge government Obamacare bureaucracy to run it. So often in the past, Congress has passed legislation that was ill thought out. The Fugitive Slave Act was, of course, repealed. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 that gave life to the Great Depression was eventually repealed in favor of free markets. Now we must repeal Obamacare in favor of free health care markets and in favor of telling the truth. We must have the courage to act on what is now obvious. Government intervention has fueled healthcare costs through regulations, state-mandated coverages, and Obamacare. We must eliminate those regulations. We must repeal state mandates, and most importantly, we must repeal Obamacare. Let us have the courage to say that, and let us have the courage to do that. So we have a final request of Barrack Obama, Jeanne Shaheen, Carol Shea Porter, and Ann Custer. America deserves the truth. Can you finally let us hear it from you? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. The next person who's asked to speak is someone I know well, our former deputy speaker in New Hampshire, who's currently a state representative from Greenland and Newington. And she looks a heck of a lot better in a dress than I do, so I'm going to let her talk. Pam Tucker.
Thank you all for coming today. It is a gorgeous day. I must say, I'd rather be at the beach with my children, but being here is a good alternative. Obamacare, where do we start with this? The Representative O'Brien did give us an overview, but we know it's a disaster. Senator Baucus, who is a Democrat out of Montana, described it as a train wreck. Its backers claim how wonderful and great it is. Yet now, if it's that great, why did we delay the implementation of it? The number of exemptions and exceptions to Obamacare, it's staggering, including whole states like Maine who are going to get an exemption to it. And a little bit closer to home, we need to think about how this is going to affect us. The answer we know, it's not all that pretty. There's two components that we really need to think about when we're talking about Obamacare and how it's going to affect us here in the state. And that's the Medicaid expansion portion of it, as well as the healthcare exchanges. The Medicaid expansion means the government, our federal government, is going to give us over $2 billion in the coming years. In fact, I was reading the paper this morning, the Portsmouth Herald, as I'm out on the seacoast, and Speaker Norelli claims New Hampshire will get $1 million a day from expanded Medicaid. That sounds too good to be true, and I'm telling you, it is. There's quite a few questions that really need to be answered before we start talking about free money. Where's the money coming from? Well, I think we know the answer to that one. But further, we know that Medicaid, it doesn't provide the best services to those who use it. And there's no valid reason why we would want to provide more people services in a failing system with worse services. The solution for Medicaid is reform, not expansion. Let's fix what's broken before we continue and make it worse for more people out there. And then there's the healthcare exchanges. They're part of Obamacare. In 2 months, on October 1st, these healthcare exchanges are to be set up across the country. But half of the states, and thankfully New Hampshire is one of those, have refused to do so far. Again, thank the last legislator for that. The feds, again, promised us money for us to set this all up. But then you got to ask again, for how long is that money going to come in? We're told we can get out of the exchange at any time. But have you ever heard of a government program that's been discontinued? And once the money's gone, New Hampshire is once again on the hook for paying that program, and that means out of the taxpayers' and ratepayers' pockets. The proponents of setting up the exchange claims will allow us for shopping for health care and lower costs, kind of like you do on the internet right now. Suppliers are going to sign you up and you can go shopping. But how are we going to go shopping for the best product when our choices are limited? Currently, there is only one provider who said they'll participate in this exchange program in New Hampshire. Sadly, Obamacare, it's a great example of how government has gone out of control and must stop. Each of us here today and each of these speakers will continue to stop this runaway train and before it ruins health care for all of us. Again, thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you, Pam. And she's so fast, she beat me to the punch. The next person who's asked to speak is Representative George Lambert, who represents Litchfield and Manchester's wards 8 and 9. And he's come up here, he wants to talk about particularly some of the impacts it's going to have on towns, because he's also former selectman in Litchfield, and the consequences on property taxes, as well as impacts on the costs of creating jobs here in New Hampshire. So, George?
Thank you, everyone. Following Bill O'Brien and Pam Tucker is pretty tough because they're both great speakers and way smarter than I am most of the time. But I don't have to be that smart. I can call people. This morning I called the town administrator in Litchfield and I said, so between now and this year's budget, in 2010, a couple years ago, how much did the risk of Obamacare cost the taxpayers in Litchfield? Because the insurance company said, well, we're going to adjust your rates. And anyone have an idea what that cost has been so far? 23.32% in actual tax dollars to our community today. That is your cost of insurance care coverage that you're not paying in your paycheck, that you will pay in your property taxes. Everyone in this state, directly or indirectly, unless they're domiciled and working for some political campaign that leaves, pays property taxes one way or another. If you're going to feel an increase, everything you do, it is going to ripple through our society. We are going to have to pay these amounts. And Obamacare isn't something that the people who passed it want. We've all heard that the legislators who passed it aren't actually covered by it, right? They don't want it. You know why? Probably because they've read it or someone who works for them has read it. You've all heard that. It's an old joke, right? If you've read it, you don't want it. Well, the people who are supposed to enforce it, that would be the IRS. Well, they have some people who've read it too, and they don't want it. They're willing to enforce it on you. They're willing to enforce it on me. They don't want to have anything to do with it. Why is it that the people who represent us are not getting the fact that we are going to foot the bill, we're going to make commitments we can't afford, and we're going to have health care that is actually going to put the people of this state at risk? When it's you who are going to be looking at a healthcare decision and having someone say, you can't have that coverage, you can't have those solutions, it's going to be a problem. But our governor the other day said, well, there's all this, commentary on death panels. Everybody wants to say death panels don't exist. I don't know whether death panels will exist in the legislation. It's all kind of crazy how they implement it. But any conversation we're going to have about, death with dignity in this state, we're not going to have because our governor just said, we're going to kill a committee on that. Pass the Senate, pass the House. But we vetoed it because we shouldn't actually have a conversation. But we can let the Obamacare people have that conversation without us. That makes sense, right? I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared because we, as a state, are going to be stuck with the financial outcomes that have to do with this bill in our tax bill, in our communities, and people aren't going to see it until it's too late. As a selectman, I had too many people call me up and say, but because of my tax bill, I'm going to have to move out of a community I've lived in for 40 years. How many people want to actually tell your neighbor, we're sorry, your tax bill's gone up so much, you have to move? I'm not willing to tell them anymore. So we need to get out, we need to knock on their doors, and we need to say, hey, call people who can stop this. Thank you. I'm George Lambert. Have a great day.
Thank you, George. Just in case you haven't seen him, Matt, where are you, Matt? Matt's back here. Matt is having some people go around collecting information. For those folks who don't already receive our emails, want to make sure that you get on our list so you can learn more information about what's going on in the state, what's going on with Obamacare and how it's being implemented, and you can stay educated and knowledgeable about these issues. And so we really ask that you get involved and really get on that list and get those daily or weekly updates. Not daily, trust me, we don't flood your inbox. So our last speaker of the day is a representative from Alton. Actually, it's Alton, Gilmanton, and Barnstead. I apologize. Representative Jane Cormier has come down today, and she's also asked to say a few words, and then we'll let you go and enjoy the beautiful day. Thank you.
I don't like to take any chances, so I have tape. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, I would like to first thank every one of you that came out today. I see so many familiar faces, the same faces we see at all the rallies and the events that happen around here at the State House. And without you, we would be speaking to absolutely nobody. So God bless you for being in this conversation and being present today. Americans in 13 states are rebelling against the Affordable Health Care Act, or what I like to call the Unaffordable Health Care Act. While Congress has done little to repeal this monster, the truth is, for Obamacare to take hold, state governments must agree to implement parts of this federal mandate. But these 13 states are moving against the setting up of health care exchanges for Obamacare, working with their governors and state legislators to not comply with this socialization of our health care. New Hampshire will take up this discussion of exchanges again in the fall, and this debate will be very important for New Hampshire, and we hope that you are vocal in standing against these exchanges. I believe a large part of the motivation, of course, for sitting out this abomination, as Obamacare, is financial. Many states are rightfully concerned that the expansion is going to bankrupt their state budgets. Bureaucrats tell us federal subsidy will be there for the states who participate, at least for a few years. But we're not even sure that that will happen. The truth is the record for the federal government is dismal. And are we now going to believe that what they say regarding the funding of this unprecedented and huge subsidy? It's clearly a big stakes program, folks, and it's too big for New Hampshire to participate in. In this financially distressed economy, forcing people to buy into Obamacare or be fined for not having insurance is putting many Americans in a difficult position. Is it even constitutional to be doing this? I do not believe so. Now, there's also 20 wonderful tax hikes that's embedded in this bill, and that number's going to change, folks, as the bureaucrats start tinkering even further with this law. How are we to defend against bankrupting our children and grandchildren under government-run health care? How do we work to keep our high-quality health care if our system is headed for bankruptcy? Along with the lowered quality of health care, there will be reduced access to that care. With the retirement of 77 million baby boomers that began in 2011, the Medicare program is going to have to absorb an unprecedented demand for medical services. Finding a doctor is going to be even more difficult, and waiting times for those appointments is going to be longer. The American Association of Medical Colleges projects a shortage of 124,000 doctors by 2020. Obamacare is clearly a disaster in the making in every way possible. Now, our state officials here in New Hampshire should recognize one very important but simple fact. States are not mere agents for the federal government. States are not powerless. There is absolutely nothing that requires states to assist in implementing this misguided legislation. Rather, New Hampshire should take every opportunity to assert our rightful authority, resist within the confines of law and our Constitution any inappropriate or unconstitutional exercise of Washington's power. New Hampshire must not carry out the federal policy. Sorry, here we go, blown away. New Hampshire must not carry out the federal policy agenda of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. This isn't discussed near enough, folks. HHS will become a mammoth power in our government, controlling all access to our health care. The powers held by this department will be unsurpassed by any other governmental agent, except, of course, the Internal Revenue Service. And to imagine the IRS being the watchdog of our health care is chilling. At a time when our federal government is infested with scandal and impropriety, are we really going to entrust it with our health care? I say no. No, we are not. I believe New Hampshire can do better. We can solve the challenges of health care to the citizens in our state. We need to come together and work for free and open market policies with common sense solutions to the challenges we face. We need to elect small government-loving officials to solve the problems of health care. These problems exist in New Hampshire and they exist in the federal government, but we can do it. After all, we are the live free or die state. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Jane. And I just want to say again, one more time, say thank you. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate having you. But we also say that it's important not just to show up at an event like this. It's important to make sure your voice is heard. There are a number of opportunities, and again, we'll let you know when there are activities going on across the state to come out and make sure your voice is heard. And if you are concerns about the implementation of Obamacare, if you have concerns about the impact it'll have on our nation, on our individual health, as well as on just the healthcare environment nationally, and you feel that there are better ways of doing it, and you feel as though that a free market strategy would help get us there, please make sure you get involved. And we'll keep up getting the message out, and you guys just keep on staying active and staying involved. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and I really appreciate you coming out.